On Friday, April 8th, 2016, Pope Francis released the long-awaited post-synodal exhortation, the Apostolic Exhortation on the family, Amoris Laetitia, which means the joy of love. Now, it's a massive document, 260 pages, some 300 paragraphs. And so I don't expect that many of you have already gone through it exhaustively. And so that's why we've invited someone who has. Archbishop Richard Smith, the Archbishop of Edmonton, is here to tell us a little bit about the exhortation, what it means, Amoris Laetitia, and also a little bit about the challenges that families here in Canada face. And so happy to be again with you.
Pleased to be here.
Maybe we should start with Amoris Laetitia. So you were at the synod last October, so the Second Synod.
Exactly, 2015.
What was that experience like?
Fascinating. It was my first experience of a synod. And we were there, bishops from all parts of the globe, together with the Holy Father. And he had summoned the bishops at our last gathering, as well as the preparatory one year prior, to speak with him and to share with him our own insights and thoughts on the issue of family. This is clearly something that has been inhabiting the heart and the mind of the Holy Father for quite some time. He's very well aware of the needs and the challenges of family life today, and clearly wants to bring the beauty of the gospel, the hope and the light of the gospel to bear on the reality of family life. So he called us together, and in that synod I was hearing interventions from bishops from every continent, and with perspectives quite different from those that we would have here in North America. So very eye-opening and a beautiful experience of communion gathered around the Holy Father, who really very much spent the time listening to his bishops.
Were you there as an observer, or were you there?
No, I was one of the synod delegates from
So you had a chance to make a presentation?
I did.
And what was your presentation? What was your focus?
Well, the bishops, when they make presentations, it's usually on the basis of responding to some aspect of the working document, the Instrumentum Laboris.
Yes.
And I was struck by one particular paragraph that talked about the need to fashion an authentic family spirituality today. And I thought, well, what's involved in that? And so I just offered a couple of thoughts whereby nothing new or earth-shattering, but I think some things that we need to continue to say. The centrality of Jesus, obviously, within the family. The need to be real in our relationships with one another, not just virtual. The whole virtual world is impacting family relationships in such a way that it's becoming increasingly difficult to connect and to be in communion with one another. So how can we start to look in family life at one another, at our response to circumstances and so on, as God would? So I think these are some elements that we would need to have at the center of family life in order to foster what that working document called for, an authentic family spirituality centered on Christ, centered on the Word, and living from the wisdom that He gives.
Yeah, and sometimes that wisdom is given to us by our elders, our grandparents, and you told me earlier that reading the exhortation for you was like sitting with Grandpa.
Beautiful experience. You know, as I read through the document, now admittedly, as you and I speak, it's at a distance of just 3 or 4 days from the release of the exhortation, so I've read it through just the once. But anybody who reads it even the once knows that you have to go back to this, as the Holy Father himself invited us to do. It's very deep and reflective and offers all kinds of wisdom. But it was precisely that experience as I read it. The Pope's Pastoral Heart, and he's well known for his Pastoral Heart, it beats very strongly all through this document. As any post-synodal apostolic exhortation will do, it cites quite often interventions from the bishops. He will cite some teachings of national episcopal conferences also, but also with any papal document, we want to hear the distinctive voice of our Holy Father. And it does come through very much. And any family reading this exhortation would just know immediately and instinctively that the Pope gets it.
Yeah.
Whatever is going on in our lives, the Pope gets it. And he doesn't just get it, he feels it. And he feels it with us. And here's our Holy Father walking with us, and like a very loving and extremely wise grandfather, he's sitting with his family and giving beautiful advice and counsel. So it's a very heartwarming document that way. So Francis does shine through beautifully.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you see a need for families to be real. Is that something that you see? Are you talking about kids, parents being stuck to their mobile devices all the time? Tell me about that.
Talk about it all the time. And you know, there was a couple of moments, this has happened on 2 different occasions, where just observing the interaction between a parent and a very young child brought that point home rather forcefully. I'm going to correct myself. It was observing not interaction between parent and child, but non-interaction. So in each case, a mom or a dad was walking wherever and holding by the hand a little child, in each case about 3-4 years old. And in the other hand was the smartphone. And you can probably guess where the attention was. It was right here. And the attention of the child was here, there, and everywhere. But the message being received by the child, non-verbally, was very clear. Whatever's happening here is more important than you. And that was a very striking instance of how that virtual world, the incessant messaging that comes at us, the obsessiveness and almost the addiction that can be created in our lives, in our connectedness with this device, can really cause havoc in the family. But the family is the place where we have to be real with one another. You know, that if I can't be real with the people that I love and that love me, and that I'm somehow interacting via a third party virtually, the relationships are starting to come apart a little bit, and we need to be very, very attentive to the impact of that on family life today.
Be real and be present.
Be real, present, and learn the ability to speak, to talk, to have conversations. I was talking with a dad one time, and he was half joking about a conversation he had with his 13-year-old daughter, and she was using her phone to text her friends all the time. And he says, "Why don't you use your phone to phone?" And the little girl apparently said, "Well, I couldn't do that. We'd have nothing to talk about. We'd have to have something to talk about then." So what's going on in this texting and virtual world that's really weakening our ability to relate to one another?
Now you go a lot to schools, and is this something that you see in the schools, that parents are not present, that kids are spending too much time at daycare than school? And
well, I'm seeing in schools behaviors that are symptomatic of something. Something awry, something that's gone off the rails within the family. And I think it's going to take some conversation and thinking through and exploration to know exactly what that is. But it's clearly something serious. So yes, I've made a commitment to visit all of our schools here in the Archdiocese. And there are recurrent patterns such as children deliberately coming to school early and staying late as they can, because it's safer for them, more secure, happier in school than at home. And sometimes when I visit schools, I'll get there early before the children arrive. And so I'll watch them come through the doors of the school and see them make a beeline to their teacher or to the principal for a hug. And it's not just, that happy hug, quick. They hold on. And so I've talked to the teachers and the principals about it, and they said, at home, for many of the kids, high incidences of divorce, other instances of dysfunction in the family, and so on. And a lot of the children have ceased feeling that they've got anything solid to hold on to in the home. And within the school, they're finding structure, discipline, solidity that's creating an environment for them in which they feel more secure. So it raises the question, what is happening at home? Talked a minute ago about the impact of the virtual world. That could be part of it, but what else might be happening? And it highlights for us the need really to take a good look at the reality of family life and the need to heal it.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about healing the family, because in our other conversation that we've been having this week about end-of-life issues, you keep coming back to that this is an opportunity not just to talk about ideas, but to help families heal. So you see that that's part of the same.
Well, the requests that we hear about for assisted suicide or euthanasia really bring to the fore the need for healing in the family. The studies have shown, surveys have shown, that often when people seek to end their lives by assisted suicide or euthanasia, it's out of a fear, not of suffering or pain. That's kind of low down on the list, but a fear of being a burden for the people.
To their family.
To their family.
Yeah.
So what's happening in family life that I would worry about being a burden? I mean, when I am weakened and when I am dependent, yes, to a degree, I become a burden to others that have to take extra steps to care for me and so on. But to think that is a burden that a family member may not be willing to undertake is a terrible situation in which we find ourselves. The other reason that's often behind requests for assisted suicide is the feeling of having been abandoned by family members, of having been isolated, and I don't really matter to my family, so now that I'm suffering or now that I'm approaching the end of my life, why hang around any longer than I need to? So when you realize that there are family issues very often behind these requests for end of life, that becomes another clear clarion call, it seems to me, to look at family and to recover its beauty and to bring healing wherever that's possible.
Do you see also symptomatic in what you see in the schools, issues of economics or finances, parents, either single parents that have to work 2 jobs, or unemployed or underemployed parents? Is that affecting?
Well, yes, very much. It's affecting family life, and it's impacting children in a couple of different ways. Right now, as we speak, of course, Alberta finds itself in a rather significant economic downturn.
Yeah.
And that's really causing a lot of havoc in families. It's causing a deep anxiety, a fear, not just for the present, but for the future. How is this all going to unfold? So it creates a sense of insecurity within the family that cannot help but have a negative impact on children. But I'm also learning in my visits to schools that especially among high school students, they are, together with all the pressures that they're under anyway, just for studies and exams, they're having to go out and work, not just one job, sometimes 2, and not for their benefit, but to support the family. So this causes all kinds of tension and all kinds of frustration. And if there's not something solid for the family to hold on to as a reason for hope, the operative dynamic becomes one of fear and anxiety. And that leads to frustration, it leads to anger. And sometimes that anger, what we find, can also lead to violence.
I was thinking that obviously broken families, when you mentioned that children would go to school, I thought that they were going to school early and staying late because the parents were not at home. But you're making it, but that you said that they feel safer at school than they feel at home makes me think that there might be either abuse or violence in the home.
Or just a lack of a loving environment or a lack of a sense of a secure environment.
Do you see that issues of violence are more obviously prominent with certain communities? I know you have a large Aboriginal population here in the Archdiocese of Edmonton.
This operates at all levels.
I've
asked people about this. We have, of course, our Catholic Social Services Agency here, and they're on the front lines of family issues. And I've had a number of conversations with administration there, with workers, They'll say, listen, this is across the board.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So it's not related necessarily to economic or poverty or...
Those can be factors that really exacerbate the situation, but sometimes there are
Yeah.
deeper issues. And I think certainly from a Christian perspective, what we have to highlight as a foundational cause of a lot of these family problems is the eclipse of God in our society today. Tell you the reason I think about that. Yes, we have a lot of family violence in this particular province of Alberta. We have a lot of people responding to that, including one particular shelter for women that I'm thinking of, and it's managed by a community of sisters. And I was talking to the sister one day who really runs the place, and I said, what's behind all of this? What's the deepest issue that seems to be fueling this violence? And she really didn't hesitate. She said it's the lack of trust. And that lack of trust related to the eclipse of God. God is the one who truly is the trustworthy one, that in the midst of any difficulties or trials, we know that we can call out, He will answer, He will respond, He will help. In the absence of that kind of secure trust, we fall back upon ourselves. Well, instinctively we know that we're weak, we're vulnerable, we're limited, and if we find ourselves up against situations far more powerful than we are, where we're powerless to do anything, that can create anxiety, fear, anger, that can blow up into violence against one another.
Yeah, except that people who are suffering, families that are suffering, maybe they're not even going to church, which is, I guess. So where do we, if a family that is having difficulties and they come for help, I might not necessarily, is that where I start that conversation, or do I leave that until they're ready to have that conversation?
I think it's the latter. Where we always start, the common starting point is love. I go back to Benedict, and I'm forgetting where Pope Benedict actually made this comment, but he said, there are times when we know to speak, and when we're called to speak about God and the hope and the security that faith gives. But then there are other times when we know that we just let love alone speak. And allowing love to speak creates the opportunity, at whatever the opportune moment would be, to speak of the source of that love and the reason for the love and the reason thereby for the hope that we would have. So Pope Francis too, of course, he's always asking us to go out, calling us to go out to the peripheries, especially to families that find themselves suffering in so many ways. But we have opportunities, even if they're not coming to our churches, they will often come to us through our institutions. Now here in Alberta with the Catholic schools, the peripheries come to us. And all the problems that families suffer enter into our schools with the entrance of the students. And this is an opportunity to embrace them in love. Our Catholic social institutions are in regular contact and dialogue with the suffering and with the needy. There's another opportunity where we allow love to speak.
Talking about broken families and divorce, of course, where do you see, or as a response to the Synod, I know it came up, the issue of marriage preparation and how much we should be doing before couples get married to help them and support them through those marriages, instead of putting all our money in the annulments and divorce.
That was a constantly recurring theme among all the interventions that were given by the bishops during the Synod. And it forms a major part of the Pope's teaching himself within this apostolic exhortation. And what we all recognize is a fundamental inconsistency in what I would call vocational preparation. Marriage is a vocation. Well, those that are preparing to serve as priests in the church, to respond to that vocation, have years of full-time, intense preparation, right? Their formation through the seminary process and so on. Marriage is an equally important, equally beautiful vocation as is the priesthood. And sometimes marriage, because of its own internal dynamics, can be a lot more challenging than living out the priesthood. And yet somehow we've fallen into this practice of, come to a few
weekends,
classes, or a couple of weekends, and we'll talk about some things and sign off, and you're so-called ready.
Yeah.
So we need to, there's a couple things around preparation. I do think we need to work in our own respective life and family offices in our diocese to review marriage preparation. I know that's happening here. How can we improve it? How can we strengthen it, lengthen it to make it what our couples need it to be? But there's another distinction that we need to keep in mind that also came up frequently in the synodal interventions, and that's the one between immediate and remote preparation.
Yeah.
So in the remote preparation, what are we doing with our young people, with our students, in our schools, teaching them about marriage, discussing it with them, finding ways in which we can give them safe spaces to talk about perhaps family difficulties that they are experiencing, so that on the basis of perhaps their own experience of family dysfunction, they do not draw the conclusion that marriage is not a good, that marriage is not possible.
Right.
But we continue to hold it up
Yes.
as something that can indeed be lived. It's something that's part of God's plan and design for all of humanity. So there's the immediate and the remote preparation leading up to marriage. The other area where we can do a lot better job, it seems to me, is walking with recently married couples, and certainly in the early years of their marriage. And how can we prepare for that by, in the lead-up preparation, strengthen the connection with parishes, that they understand that when their marriage is celebrated, it's in the context of a vibrant parish community of faith that is inviting, that is welcoming, that wants to be, and I love this phrase from Pope Francis' Bull of Benediction for the Year of Mercy, in a parish that wants to be, for them and for all, an oasis of mercy, so that as you enter into married life and you encounter, as you inevitably will, the challenges and the difficulties, there's places where you can go, people who want to receive you, who've probably lived through the same experiences and want to walk with you.
Yes, and I guess that would include those people where the marriage is broken or they're divorced, that they should know that they can come to that oasis of mercy, and that they can participate. Who should read this exhortation? You said that if a family reads it, and I never thought that this is something that we should read as a family, but is that what you're suggesting?
I think everybody needs to read this one.
Yes.
Because everybody has come from a family, everybody lives to some degree within familial relationships. Family impacts everybody. I would also suggest that it ought to be read by civil authorities who, in their own perspective frameworks and their spheres of action, are in a position to create family-friendly, family-supportive policies. But in doing that, from what perspective? You know, and what we have here in the Pope's Apostolic Exhortation is a beautiful presentation of really what captures in Francis' own way the 2,000-year tradition of Christianity's message and insight about marriage and family as part of God's plan, as the place where we experience God's love and learn how to share that love with one another.
Good. We're going to leave it there.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Archbishop Smith says that everybody should read it. You can read it. It's on the Salt and Light blog, saltandlighttv.org/blog. If you have any questions, anything about you've heard about this program, we've been speaking with Archbishop Richard Smith. He's the Archbishop of Edmonton. And we've been talking about the latest apostolic exhortation, the post-synodal exhortation, Amoris Laetitia, on the joy of love for the family. Any questions, any comments, you can send them to us via email, focus@saltandlighttv.org. And also, you can always reach us through social media. Just don't spend too much time on social media, Facebook and Twitter. I'm Deacon Pedro, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Focus.